So welcome, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks as always for joining, and hopefully you're getting some tremendous education to help you along your personal and financial journey. So today I'm honored to have a guest with me today. Isn't me just yapping by myself. I got experts I like to bring on to share their wisdom, their experience, and expertise to hopefully benefit you. So I'm here with Steve DeTray. He's a business exit and value growth coach with Freedom Path Planning, and I got to meet Steve over the course of my journey in the wealth strategy space, and he's been an interesting guy to know because he came from the financial world too, and he's kind of migrated into this other world of helping business owners. So, Steve, welcome to the show, and I appreciate that you spent some time today.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's crazy because me transition, and I know you moved away from the financial services space. I moved to it, and thinking of it like a business, right? We kind of have to, right? It isn't just advising, right? And most small business owners, and I read it on your site, which I found fascinating, that most 86% of small and medium-sized business owners do not have any business succession plan.
Correct.
87% have no retirement plan.
Yep.
98% had no business consultant helping them, and 100% wanted to pay less taxes. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And 100% will try to sell at some point in the future. So I guess this is where you guys come in, right? So Steve, tell us a little bit more about your background, a little bit, before getting into some of the weeds with kind of Freedom Path Planning. What's your story, and how did you get into this field?
Yeah. So right out of college, got into the financial services industry, wealth management, helping retirees at first, and then kind of moved into the business owner space and really just kind of focused on getting them to retirement, not really focused on growing their business or anything, setting up exit plans. It was more, okay, let's make sure we have an income plan, right? When you unload this thing. So did that for about 15 years, had a unique opportunity come across my desk, and with financial services, there's compliance and all this other stuff. And the RIA I was with said, basically, we understand what you're doing. It makes perfect sense. We just don't want to put it under compliance. So either let it go or, exit. And I was like, okay, well, exit it is. And so I did a quick exit in probably 2.5 months, which probably the biggest mistake. And I will say that's usually the biggest mistake every business owner makes, is the not giving themselves enough runway to exit. And mine, looking back, cost me a crazy amount of money because I exited so quick and left a lot of it on the table.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, again, this is where before we got recording here, it was sometimes we need these hard lessons and pains so that it obviously makes us better, but now you're using it for good for other folks so they can not repeat those mistakes, which is great.
100%.
Right. So, interesting now, and as I've migrated even in my own world, like to kind of, because, being an employee, I was for a while for myself personally, going to a business owner is a big change, right? And some of the people you probably are helping maybe did that, or, they're an expert in a certain field, they are creating a business, but maybe hasn't got, their head around what a business owner is and what that sort of represents in terms of areas. So, what's that like? What are the types of people you're coming across? What's that experience like for them to sort of start thinking about, having the business owner mindset versus, hey, my expertise?
Yeah. So, and it's really industry agnostic. An entrepreneur is just an entrepreneur, right? They just happen to be in whatever industry they're in, whatever business they started. The funny thing is they're all the same. They all were really good at doing whatever they're doing, building their widgets or selling their widgets, So, but from the employee to the business owner mindset it's a huge shift that a lot of business owners don't get until right at exit is when they're looking at that shift. Mainly because they're really focused on growing their business. They're not even thinking about exit at some point in the future. I'm going to do it. Some of them actually say, I'm going to die in my chair. Okay. But so they're going to exit. 100% of them are going to exit. Right. So basically it's just a mindset of which one is either the manager mindset or the owner mindset. And a lot of our job is trying to get owners to think like owners.
Yeah, that's crazy. So for your, for freedom path planning. So tell me more about kind of the things you're helping business owners, because some are, obviously run across people who are starting up, right? Kind of getting into it. Maybe they've transitioned from a job, right? Versus kind of, hey, I'm starting to gain some traction and sort of now maybe thinking about scaling or
Yeah.
trying to grow it versus, hey, I'm on towards the end of it now. I'm trying to, like, where are you typically falling in and helping folks?
So where you usually get brought in, and I'm always trying to educate everybody we work with, right? Is the more time you talk about the startup, always thinking with the end in mind, right? Am I going to exit? Even if right from the beginning, if you have that planned out, it makes your decision process that much easier because you know where you're going. Usually when we get brought in, too many times to even count is when the owner goes, hey, I want to sell this thing in 6 months. And we're like, oh, yeah, not a good, yeah, it's just, you're not, unless you did any prep work, and most of them haven't, it's nope, just want to sell this thing. And that's usually when we get brought in. So if one thing I could always tell everybody is start 5 years early. That is at least, that's a minimum 5 years, because usually most exit takes between 3 and 9 years anyway. And that's where a lot of business owners don't think about this is once you start the process, it's still an ongoing process to that exit. So from ideal, I would say our ideal is 5 years out. We can do a lot in 5 years and make sure that the owner's super happy with their exit.
Yeah, you always hear that sort of phrase, like start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And, I guess depending where people are, it's just so mired in the work of it and maybe still growing it that sometimes it's hard to even pinpoint what that looks like, right? In reality.
And not even just that, it's just the fact that business owners, let's be honest, they're so busy. And too many of them, I think just about all business owners, if they're not in this cycle, they're usually have been in this season where, they're so busy just working in their business that they haven't had time to even work on their business. And working on their business isn't just like an exit planning type of exercise, but it's all of the stuff that just running a business, working on it. And I'm sure every business owner that's listening to this podcast has definitely heard that from some quote unquote guru. You need to spend time working on your business, not so much working in your business.
Yeah, no, it's one of those, you hear it enough and then some days it will hit you probably, but to take the time. But, again, as you're in the midst of it, maybe doing 1,000 different jobs, it probably is very difficult.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
And you came from it too, like, from a typical advisor standpoint, certainly financial advisor, they're not really equipped to help people with this, right?
Yeah.
Business owners, right? Because they're, like you said, you're trying to manage assets, maybe, that maybe get created from the income from this, right, business. And maybe you're planning for exits, but maybe, leading up to the sale of it, they're not involved as much, right? There's not so much there. So it's like who they're getting help with, well, they're probably not getting any help, right?
And I will say that's one of the frustrations in a lot of business owners, especially today's age, they need a team, right? And it's the jack of all trades, master of none, right? So if you are, and business owners have a very complex way of how their assets are. Majority of their assets are usually tied up in that illiquid asset in their business. So how does everybody or every advisor come together and even help put together a plan? How most business owners, and this is what we see day in and day out, how most business owners go about it is they actually have to put the plan in themselves by, hey, I got to talk to my financial advisor on this, and then I got to talk to my CPA on this, and then I got to look at this exit planning stuff over here. And they're basically putting it all together by playing quarterback. And I'm like, and they're still trying to run a business. So you can see why most of them just kick that can down the road going, I'll get to that. I'm not ready to exit yet, but I'll get to it. And then they show up on my doorstep and go, yep, I'm burnt out. I'm tired of dealing with employees. Everybody's quitting and coming back. And then, I've got so much, and now we're starting from scratch, but we're also starting, on the wrong leg because you're not in the right mindset. You just want to get out. And if you would have put some kind of groundwork ahead of time, and your life would be so much easier. And if you do get burnt out, which does happen, hey, you've already got some of a plan in place, and there's just small moves we need to make, and you can exit.
Yeah. So you said around, say, whatever it is, 3 to 5 years, kind of ideally, like if that's a vision you have that maybe someday you maybe want to sell your business, that's probably a good time to start kind of getting the groundwork started, right? And
Yep.
is that accurate?
Yes, there's one exception. Now, I know you just read off a bunch of stats. I'm one of those stat guys that I was a financial advisor, so numbers just make sense to me. Here's a stat that, again, I talked before we started recording today, but it was the number one stat that literally should wake up just about every business owner. I said 100% of them are going to exit. And anybody can Google this and it'll pop up with a number of different studies, but 50% of business exits are actually involuntary. They're happened from some external force that put on the business. Is usually the 5 Ds, right? Divorce, disability, disagreement, disaster, and I'm missing the other one. But basically some outside force that came on, and 50% of exits happen from that standpoint. And again, if you weren't prepared, which you already read the other stats on businesses not being prepared, chances are they're going to have a fire sale or basically not realize the value of their business
No,
or the full value.
Yeah, it just came up more recently in a conversation where somebody was thinking of selling in the next few years, and the question was, if something happened to you today, what would be the value of your business? What do you think?
Yeah. Now there's stats. Again, I love stats. 98% of business owners, 98, so that's pretty close to 100%, don't know right now what the value of their business is because they've never had a valuation done. They have a gut feeling, right? This is what I think it's worth, but I actually just got done running one where the business owner thought the business was worth $3 million, and here to find out it was actually worth $5.3 million, and changed the conversation a little bit. And the potential value, actually, because we run a value gap, the potential value was $8 million. But they were under the assumption it was going to be between 2.5 and 3 million. Usually it's the other way around that a business owner goes, well, my business is worth 10 million. And in reality, it might only be worth 3 million.
Yeah. So I think of it this way, and I know it's more complicated than this, and this is maybe where we start because, I'm thinking like selling a house. Now you hear today, some people are having to fire sale their homes, right?
Yeah.
For whatever situation. It could be those Ds or, interest rates are killing me, whatever. But then you got a fire sale and the asset values dramatically dropped because I got to rush to sell it versus someone who they'll see that ahead of time, maybe make changes to their house on how it's designed, maybe whatever to add more value to it over time. And then when you go to exit, you can time it right in the situation that's best suited for you to maximize it, not be rushed. And I assume that's going to apply to a business. And there's probably more moving parts to it. But in essence, that's the core thing we're talking about, right?
Well, 100%. And honestly, I've been getting more and more calls where private equity has been reaching out to certain industries, right? And then I'll get a call, hey, I'm in the middle of this negotiation. Can you guys help us with even just the negotiation part of it? But you look at their business and you're like, oh, if you would have just done this and this, and let's be honest, private equity, they do this for a living. So this is your one and only time to get it right. Yeah, right. And they do it day in and day out. So they're going to beat you up on all this stuff. So if you would have known it ahead of time, I can just adjust having like an audit from your CPA done, like right before that. They're going to ask for it anyway. Oh yeah, we've already done it. It just makes your numbers look that much better, that you're that much more prepared. It actually shows different things in there. We've had a valuation done. Just a couple little different things that you could do just to get prepared for it. It's just crazy.
So I guess, when you first, just thinking like someone is thinking about 3 to 5 years out, like I assume how do you start with them? Like, cause obviously you need to kind of know the lay of the land, like where are they? Yep. Right. So kind of walk me through kind of what that generally looks like. Obviously we can't go into detail for all of it, but like, how does it start?
Yeah. So usually we start with the end game conversation, right? What is in a perfect world, what would you like to see happen? Because no exit's going to be the same, no matter how many exits we've been through with businesses. know to her like, because every business owner is going to have their own priorities, right? Some of them are going to want the most money out of their business they can because they're going to need to live on it. You've got other ones, actually had one last night, that their big push was really not the money. They were pretty well off, and it was still a 7-figure business, but their big concern was making sure legacy was taken care of, their business didn't fail, and the next generation of owners were going to be set up for success. And they started perfect timing. They're looking at exit in 5 years. So now we've got a long enough runway to make sure that we can get just about everything in their plan that they want. So where we start is usually where is it that you would like to go? Okay. So selling to private equity is going to be different than doing an internal sale to employees or next generation kids kind of deal. So that's usually our first point, is knowing where they want to go. And then the second thing that we always do, I said it, is we get a value done on their business. Depending, we'll either do it in-house or we'll do like third party if we need a certified value. Usually that's overkill, but it's that important for us to even have an idea of where they're at, just for me to even start giving advice. And it's what we do. So if it's that important for us, I'm so shocked by seeing that number. 98% of business owners don't know the value of their business.
It's crazy. So when you go to, yeah, and that's, I can imagine that's a pretty accurate number, right? Because it's not like you can see it on your Fidelity brokerage account, like what you're, right, what's the value of it, and see something in the bank account. So it's kind of a sniffing the wind here, like a guess, best guess.
And it changes. So if you got a valuation done 3 years ago, I guarantee your value is going to be different than it was 3 years ago, because a lot changes in 3 years, right? I mean, think 5 years ago, we were in COVID, how many businesses were affected on COVID that it affected everybody? If you did a valuation 2 years prior to that, well, it's going to be an all new ball game just because of that. So many things, to your point, so many different things that are in the market that are affecting your business. Being a business owner, you need to have a pulse on your business. And usually it starts with evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like kind of a reality check, right? In terms of it. And then this is where you're getting, expert sort of lens, like from people like you, to say, what are some of those kind of things that are, when you look at it, obvious things that they could be doing that adds massive value to their business that they're just not doing or have in place? Like, what are you typically seeing kind of the bigger things that are just big gaps when you're looking at evaluating business owners?
So if I take it from a non-industry specific, so I won't pick on any industry because they will all have their nuances, but from a high level, most business owners, I would say probably the biggest thing that I see in privately held businesses, so one owner or husband and wife, maybe two owners, the biggest thing that I usually see, honestly, is the business is so reliant on that business owner. Like they own a job, even though in their mind they own a business, but they own a job. So in one of the questions we ask almost all the time, in any one of our surveys we do, any one of our audits or analysis, the question is in, I think, 4 different places. But if your business couldn't survive, or how would your business survive if you left or you were unable to work for 3 months? Whatever happened, you're unable to work, or you just want to take a 3-month vacation. How would that affect your business? And if your business doesn't do as good or better with you not there, well, then that's an issue. Just from a simple standpoint of that is the one employee guaranteed that's not going to be with the company if I buy it long term, right? We're buying you out, you're leaving, right? You might be on for a couple years to transition, but you're gone. And so most owners, I don't think they realize how much that affects the valuation of their company based on how involved they are in the business or how dependent the business is on them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's like, because their expertise, they're he or she's the rainmaker, right?
Yep.
They get the engine going and the business going. But to your point, to transition that to somebody else who kind of has that same level of expertise probably takes time, right?
Yeah.
To build that out and groom for somebody and be positioned to do that. So, the value of the business can be maintained if that owner is out of the picture, right? That's really just the math of it.
It 100%. And most buyers, and if you think about it, because this is usually where I come at it from a buyer standpoint, but we work with the seller and go, here's what buyers are actually looking for. You think and most business owners, they've been in their business for 20, 30, even 40 years. So they know the numbers inside and out. They've weathered the storms up and down. But buyers today aren't looking to buy a job. So they don't want to buy your business and assume your job. They want to buy your business, and ideally you already have a CEO running it. That's not you. You're owning it. A CEO's running it. So then when I buy it, I'm buying future cash value. You have the level of buyers are a whole lot deeper. We'll put it that way. They'll be willing to pay premiums for that versus I got to buy a job and now I got to pay somebody to do your job and figure all this out for the next 3 to 5 years before I start realizing money on or my investment.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go back to real estate. I like turnkey. Somebody can walk in and I'm good. I go in, live, and versus I got to change the floor and then I got to replace the kitchen and now I got to, all this other crap I have to deal with. Well, you're able to shore all those things up. The value of your company must be massively higher, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest one across the board that we have to get the owner almost out of their own way. And once we do that, the beauty of it, honestly, is once we do that, is one of the reasons most business owners start a business is for money freedom, right? And if you're successful, usually you do have that, and time freedom, right? That's the two things that's driving. I don't want to answer to somebody else. I want to own my own time. But majority of business owners, they're probably working more than if they took a job from some Fortune 500 company, and they're smart enough, they're hardworking. So they should be able to get a C-level job somewhere, but they didn't because they wanted this time freedom as well. And none of them have it. Again, it's that mentality of that they are just their heads down and they're just working in their business, not on their business.
It's huge. And some thread I want to pull on just a little bit, you kind of mentioned earlier in our conversation is because some of these things, especially when you're getting to maybe it's not in particular more complicated as the numbers get bigger businesses, but as you're transitioning, depending on where they are, like having really a good cohesive team to support that business owner, the importance of that. And, whether it be advisors and, accountants and, obviously people like you and your team, like all the different players, like talk more about the importance of that and where you've seen that sort of really fall apart when that team is not really in place and the kind of results of what you could see.
I will say the easiest clients for us to work with have the best relationship with they either have those team members in place and those team members, whether it's a wealth manager or the CPA, because usually those two are in there, an attorney. If they already have good relationships, and then those advisors are open to collaborating and really doing everything that's in the best interest of the client. So yeah, they might have to take a phone call with me to help answer one of my questions instead of just working directly with the client. But honestly, those are going to be I see that the exits those owners have, if they have enough time window, enough runway to do it right, those exits, they're the most happy because they were able to have everything taken care of from a team-based approach where I might be doing something. This is how we're doing the exit planning, but the financial advisor is, hey, we're trying to do this and we're not talking. And he's doing something that's going to mess my plan up, or I'm doing something that's going to mess his plan up. So again, then the client gets to deal with it. And we just already addressed it. They don't have time to. So it's amazing when I find those advisors that really don't want to work. And I'm thinking to myself that if the business owner only knew, right, of that this could come back to bite them. Yeah.
Something I saw, which I thought, and maybe you could talk a little more about this, and I don't know if folks can take this as business owners if they're curious, this value builder score. Like, tell me more about that. Is that that's part of your process in maybe early stage? What does that entail?
So the value builder score really does, it measures the 8 key drivers that a buyer's usually looking for when they're buying the business. So it's really the 8 key drivers that affect the value of your business, right? Financials are important. They're super important, but there's other things. And I mentioned one. So one of the 8 drivers is, we call it hub and spoke in the value builder system, but that is the business owner. How are they impacting the value, right? Then there's the financials in there. So there's eight different things. Another one that's really important that I don't think a lot of business owners really look at, one of the drivers, and we call it the Switzerland structure, but how dependent is your business on any one key employee, client, or supplier? Okay. So that's another, and I get this question all the time. I ask, well, how's your people? Do you have one? We look at, do we have 8 players in key roles? And then if I get a business owner that says, yeah, we don't have a people problem. Okay, well, tell me about Susie. She's, your right hand, takes care of all this stuff. Oh, Susie's great. Okay, who's your biggest competitor? Oh, it's the ABC company down the road. Okay, what happens if ABC company comes to Susie and says, we're going to give you a 20% increase and an extra financial benefit or part owner, and Susie leaves? How's that going to affect your business? And it's funny when they realize that, they're like, oh, I got a people problem, right? I need to make sure Susie's happy. I need to make sure that we're protected there. It's just the little things that you think, oh no, we're great there. It's easy the negative going, yeah, and the opposite. Nope, Susie's terrible. I'd love to replace her today. Okay, that's easy to identify. But just with the value builder score, it tells you kind of where you stand on every one of those 8 drivers of what a buyer is going to be looking for.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then it's kind of like, kind of where you're strong or weak in your business, really. And then, this is where you can help them sort of strengthen those areas and hopefully get them to a level where you're optimal at the time you're selling, right? I'm not oversimplifying it, but
that's exactly, I mean, honestly, that's really in a nutshell what you're trying to do is, hey, identify the weak areas. And again, that's how we make decisions, going, okay, here's your biggest opportunity. It might just mean this is your biggest weakness, but your biggest opportunity is, let's focus right here for the next 90 days. Let's focus on this for the next 90 days and just bring that up. Now you're in better position from where you started 90 days ago. And then let's reevaluate the next 90 days. What are we going to focus on?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I guess that's how we started this, is when people are coming to your doorstep, they're like, all right, I got 6 months. I'm ready to roll. Right. Let's go. Right. And that's the majority of people. But if people can listen to this, especially your business owner listening, like the amount of, it probably takes more time in planning, just like anything worthwhile. But the value is going to be massively different on the other end. Right.
100%.
Right. It just putting the effort and work and getting the right people involved is just going to be so key.
And one of the things, not to jump ahead or kind of throw this one out, one of the other things that we kind of pride ourselves on is making sure not only is the business ready to exit, but the business owner's ready to exit. Because usually they're running 100 miles an hour until that exit and they hit a wall, whatever that is. Some diagnosis comes in, whether it's a loved one or themselves, or burnout is now a real thing and they can't even think about getting out of bed to go into the office anymore. But mentally, how ready are you for that exit? So I can't understate that enough, of doing the work on thinking of what happens after I sell this. Because if you've been running your business for, let's be honest, you've been running your business for 40 years, you probably identify as whatever you do, right? I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I make car parts, whatever it is. Then all of a sudden you don't do that anymore. There's a real emotional, if you don't prep for it and plan for that, there could be a real emotional drop off that you now deal with, like depression, and you're lost and you're unhappy in retirement. You think you got all this time freedom now, but you're like, ah, crap. I wish I would have known this before. I got money now, but don't know what to do with my time.
Yeah, that's a massive point. I mean, it's so funny because my wife and I were just talking about this morning, the exact thing. She's a teacher and she hears all these stories of people retiring and they lost their purpose, their drive, their motivation. And The life got sucked out of them at a time that's supposed to be the most enjoyable, quote unquote, the most enjoyable time,
Yes.
and have all the time, money, freedom they ever imagined. But the fulfillment isn't there and the purpose isn't there. And, things look very different.
And I seen that a lot when I was in the wealth management world. We dealt with a lot of retirees, and they're gonna do all this stuff. The happiest retirees that we ever encountered were ones that actually kept working, but it was more of like a volunteer thing, or they were involved in things. I can remember one that was happy all the time, and he started coaching baseball, like assistant coaching. So he didn't take it over, but he was involved in all kinds of things. He was always busy and giving back. He didn't need the money, so he volunteered. The ones that, let's be honest, retired and died early were the ones that had no purpose, no drive to do anything else, and they just want to sit at home. And it's like, man, that's that whole saying, retirement will kill you. That's the one. That's the one that I'm like, oh. So we made it a point when we started working with business owners to really focus on that too, making sure they're mentally ready, because I can get them all the money in the world, and if they're unhappy in retirement just because we didn't address that, well, then did I really do my job? I don't think so.
Yeah, and as I've gotten older, I appreciate these things a little bit more. Obviously people get in the business, or, driven people typically, and, strivers and achievers, and, we'll put the hard work in, high risk and such. But, a lot of this stuff is still around sort of emotional stability, mindset, right? It's so powerful, and people want to feel purposeful, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's gotta be a reason to wake up every day and do
Yeah.
something and contribute. I think most business owners want that. Most humans probably want that, right?
Yes.
But when you're transitioning, when you're that rainmaker in the business and everything's great, everyone's looking at you like, wow, this is an awesome, and now no one's looking at you. Right?
Yes.
I don't have to go to work and do anything when, you know, that life may feel less fulfilling, let's just say.
Yeah. Especially when you're running 100 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden if you do get a hard stop, right? Somebody offers you the magic number, and yeah, we're offering you that to walk away. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you can even Google looking up pro football players and basketball players and their retirement, and heck, some of the quarterbacks, really high name quarterbacks that kept coming back from retirement, Brett Favre and Peyton Manning, because it wasn't the money. They didn't need the money anymore. It was they didn't know what to do with themselves now that they weren't football players, right? It's the same thing here, which, it just needs to be addressed.
Well, that's a good part when, if you can do it in the way that is optimal, getting ahead of it, right? Even if it can pivot a little bit, right? But if you have a good number of years, and it allows you to kind of figure that out, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being thrust upon you.
Yeah.
And because you just burnt the hell out and you just have to do something. You're like, well, now what?
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? This is awesome. So, Steve, this is really great. I really appreciate your time. I know there's a lot of things around. You mentioned like business valuation and stuff that I'd love to talk more deeply over the course of time on that with you. But this was a good sort of entry point to at least bring up this sort of priority for, especially if you're a business owner thinking. Hopefully you build a business because you want to pass this on or sell it someday. Who knows? But it requires planning, right? And getting ahead of it and getting connected with folks like Steve. So, Steve, if there are folks who are interested, how best to sort of kind of reach out, learn more about what you do, or get connected with you and see if there's a fit?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find there. Email steve@freedompathplanning.com, all one word. Yeah, that's probably the either email or find me on LinkedIn.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate your time and look forward to doing some great stuff and supporting business owners across the country, helping them to maximize the thing that they've put their blood, sweat, and tears in building and serving the world and community. Love to have them maximize that value. So thanks for all the work you do, and thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, Steve. Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.